Okay, today we're starting chapter 4, and chapter 4 is dealing with polynomials. In section 4.1, we're going to be looking at exponents, and you've been dealing with exponents for a while now, so much of this could be a review. Let's look at example 1 and 2. We're going to be simplifying these expressions, and ask yourself, what is the difference between example 1 and 2? They look very similar. So in example 1, what is being squared? Well, you can only square what is directly in front of that exponent. So in this case, only the 3 is being squared. So if you were to write out what is being squared, it is just the 3. The 3 is what we call the base. Now, that negative, you can't forget about it, but you would just bring it down in front. And so our final answer would be -9. If you have a calculator handy, I would grab it and practice entering this on your calculator so that you can check it as you're doing these by hand. Now looking at example 2, how is this different? You have a whole quantity, something that's in parentheses, a whole quantity being squared. So in this case, if you were to write out what this means, the whole quantity, -3, is being multiplied by itself. So -3 times -3, well, we know that a negative times a negative is a positive. So check that one in your calculator. It's really important that you put -3 in parentheses. 1, because that's what the problem looks like, and 2, if you leave that out, you're going to get the wrong answer on your calculator. So you need to really make sure you understand what is being squared and including your parentheses when they're there. So let's look at example 3 and 4. Those are also similar but slightly different. And so in example 3, I would just encourage you, don't forget things that you already know. We've been learning from a pretty young age that we always do our parentheses first. So in this case, our parentheses need simplified. So what is 7 minus 3? It's 4. So I have 4 squared. So once I do my parentheses, then I can go to my exponent. So what this means is it's really 4 times 4, which is a positive 16. Once again, check that on your calculator that you're entering open parentheses, 7 minus 3, close your parentheses, and make sure you know how to square that. Now, how does example 4 differ? Well, what is being squared? Only the 3. And if you were to write out what this means, you would have 7 minus and then 3 times 3. Well, if you're following order of operations, you would do your multiplication before your subtraction. So you need to say this is 7 minus 9. Well, that's like saying I've got $7 and I've lost 9. I'm going to end up with a negative money. All right, moving on. Let's look at how do we evaluate expressions. So anytime you're substituting a number, I always want you to put parentheses. So in example 5, we're going to evaluate 4m to the third. I would like you to ask yourself, what is being taken to the third power? We refer to the third power as cubed. So what is being cubed? It's only the m that's being cubed. Now, this is typically what I like your steps to look like. So anytime you're substituting for a variable, before you even plug something in, I like you to put those parentheses because it reminds you that whatever m is, all of m, I need to take to the third power. So in this case, my m is -2. I need to take all of -2 to the third power. So if I leave that in parentheses, if your thought process is I need to do my parentheses first, well, there's nothing to do to that -2, right? So then I would move to my exponent, and I do have a -2 going to the third power, which means -2 times -2 times -2. You won't necessarily have to write everything out, but in the beginning, it's good to just remind yourself, what does -2 times -2 times -2 mean? And that's going to give you a -8. Now, I can't forget about the 4 that was in front, right? It was 4m to the third, or 4, think of it as 4 times m to the third. So now that I've dealt with my exponent, now I can go to my just normal multiplication. 4 times a -8, which is going to give you a -32. All right, look at number 6, and it's similar, but what is going to the third power? The entire quantity, all of 4m. Whatever 4m is going to go to the third power. So anytime you're substituting, I still like you to put parentheses. So this is really what this would look like. You're going to have a parentheses inside a parentheses. So m, I probably should have written this here. M is still -2. So we haven't changed our m. So we're going to plug in m as -2. All right, and then ask yourself, what do I do first? Well, I always start with my parentheses. Well, notice this time there is something to do inside your parentheses. So how do I simplify that parentheses? That's 4 times a -2, which is -8 to the third power. Now that I've dealt with my parentheses, now I can move to my exponents. And so this means -8 times -8 times -8, which is -512. You can also check these on your calculator. We've dealt with the stow function. So what you're going to do is you're going to do -2, and then you're going to hit stow, which is at the bottom left of your calculator, and you'll get an arrow that shows up. You want to stow it as m, so you'll hit your alpha m, and then once you have stored -2 in your calculator, then you're going to type in 4m to the third, and it's going to give you -32. And the same thing for example 6, -2 is already stored, and so when you plug in the quantity, make sure you put those parentheses there. When you have the quantity of 4m to the third, you're going to end up with -512. And that's section 4.1.